I just want to welcome everybody here. Today we're going to be talking about Rockstar Rehabbing 101, how to rehab houses like a pro. This is something I took out of my course, the art of Rockstar, and it's an amazing segment. It's going to show you exactly how to rehab a house, what stuff to do, what stuff to avoid. Definitely some good content here. This is actually a house we did in Lutz. That's the way we got it. That's the way it ended up. We ended up actually keeping that one as a rental because it was so nice I didn't want to sell it. So let's look at some of the biggest myths that people who haven't rehabbed are probably thinking this. Those who have rehabbed may not be buying into this. It's easy. If you put more money into a house, you'll sell it for more. This may sound obvious, but what I mean by that, we just had this conversation before this presentation. If a house is only capped out at a certain value or neighborhood, it doesn't matter whether you put gold sinks in it, gold floors, everything's gold. I mean, it could be like, you could have just amazing amounts of stuff. Actually, if it was gold, they might just strip it out and buy more anymore. But what I mean by that is, if the neighborhood and the area is capped, just by putting more money means you won't get more. And what restricts that? Anybody want to know what the biggest restriction on value is, besides a buyer wanting it?
Comps.
Comps. And why is it comps? Why are they restricted? If I got cash, is that restrictive? No. If I got a loan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who's going to restrict
Appraisal.
it? The appraiser.
Appraisal.
Done. It kills it right there. So this is a huge myth. People, I see it all the time. They put a house, I've seen it like in East Tampa, it's got, high-end granite and high-end stainless appliances, and they're trying to retail, for 130, the comps are at 90. I'm like, that's what it's worth. You're not going to get more than, you might get 100, you might beat the market by 5 or 10%, but you're not going to beat it by 30 or 40% if you're trying to sell it to a financed, buyer. So it's just not going to happen. So, and also, the biggest myth about rehab is the way to get the most amount of money out of the house versus wholesaling. And this is really a dynamic where you got to work out house by house. We wholesale some stuff and we retail some stuff. The reason being, sometimes it makes more sense to wholesale, sometimes it makes more sense to retail. We have a 2-to-1 rule, which is what we use. If we reasonably believe, based on our calculator, which is the way we buy properties, that we can make more than double the profit by rehabbing, we rehab. Otherwise, we just wholesale. So that's what we do. So why rehab? Well, in a nutshell, when the profit you'll make, when the profit you will make after selling property justifies the added time, effort, and risk versus wholesaling, you should rehab it. And this is really, if you're actually buying property and you're considering this applies if you've got a choice there. But if you want to just get into rehabbing, this wouldn't apply. But this is really, in some ways, directed to people that are looking for the largest to wholesaler. And I get that question asked all the time, because in 2008, 100% on wholesale. This is the reason why I rehab stuff now. Does that make sense? Because I'm looking at the time, the effort, the risk, and the reason there's risk. If you buy a house today, and you see the comps, and you put it on the market tomorrow, and you sell in a couple weeks to a cash buyer, you've eliminated that time risk. Markets don't move in days, right? The real estate market doesn't crash or rise up in one day. I mean, everyone gets that concept, right? Let's just say you got a 6 or 9 month new build construction house, maybe even a year. We'll say that your contractor sucks, so it takes a year. And we'll say you're at the peak of the market, and the comps are at 300 grand. Between the time you even haven't got it constructed, the market disintegrates. So this is a whole year. This is 4 quarters. Markets typically move in quarters. Then you got to put it on the market, and then you're still chasing the comps down. I mean, that 300 grand house, let's just say you're rehabbing a house in 2007. Perfect time to rehab a house, right? Or build a brand new house. You put it on the market in January 2008. Man, you're just chasing that thing down to the ground. So this is where, with rehabbing, there is risk. Especially if you're pushing the line and you're buying stuff at the top end and working on thin margins, you got to realize that the longer you rehab, the more risk you're creating for yourself, because if the market is not an upward market, you're hurting yourself. Plus, in most cases, your hard money costs will exceed the price of the market's appreciating, which means time's always your enemy when you're rehabbing. So let's just look at kind of which properties you should rehab versus wholesale. And even if you forget the wholesale part, which properties should you rehab? 2-to-1 rule, which I already explained. Stable pricing. Does anybody want to guess what I mean by stable pricing? Okay.
If you're in a neighborhood where the prices you're not seeing a flux, they're rising, or they're doing a slow rise, or they're not falling.
Yeah, you want comps. Buying weird houses, unless you got a lot of experience like I do, bought and sold 6,000 homes over the last 7 years, I know how to buy weird stuff. I can comp it out based on experience. Even if there's no comp, I can figure out what a buyer is going to pay for that house. If you're getting into rehabbing, don't buy weird stuff. Buy stuff where you can get comps, you can figure out the value, it's there, you can see that the pricing is stable. You don't want a subdivision where one sold for 100, one sold for 200, there's actives on the market for 130, there's another one for 170. You're like, well, what's the thing worth? Is it worth 130? Is it worth 170? Is it worth 200? Was this person just washing money at 200? I mean, who knows? Or they love the house. It's very, very hard to figure out values in a place like that. So I would recommend when you're starting out, you stay out of a neighborhood where the values are all over the place. Where you will see a difference in pricing is in a lot of neighborhoods where rehabbers move in. Because you'll see all the wholesale prices down here and you see the retail price up here. That's okay. But if you've got finance sales that take a big rise, big dip, stay out of neighborhoods like that because it's going to be really tough to predict value when you're starting out. Liquidity. What I mean by this, anybody want to guess what I mean by liquidity?
Got your cash tied up.
Okay, but as far as where you want to rehab, you want to buy in neighborhoods where stuff's selling. If you buy in a neighborhood where all your actives are sitting there for 90 days, that's not a liquid neighborhood. There's something going on. We see it a lot of times now in Miami. That's a place where we're at. A lot of the 40-year turns are coming around in these condo buildings. So what happens is the prices are even though the market's going up, that building's heading down because there's a huge special assessment coming in. So you see that the solds are at 250, and you see stuff on the market for 200 active that's not selling. And it's all sitting there, like 20 of them. And you see the price, and they all have the down arrow. Everybody know what the down arrow means in the MLS?
Price reduced.
Price drop. So yeah, you want to stay out of a place like that because you don't have a liquid product. You may not sell for any price at that point. I mean, I say that jokingly. I mean, I paid $1,000 for air because the condo building burned down, but I bought interest, basically 1/100th of the land, because the land value is on the water. So at least I own 1/100th of that land on the water. And that's why I paid $1,000 for it, because I figured, I mean, the land's got to be worth more than 100 grand in this particular location. So, you know, when I say that jokingly, but you can, if you get into a non-liquid product, you're paying hard money. I mean, it can be a really, really dicey situation. You want to make sure that stuff's moving in that subdivision. You don't want neighborhoods where stuff's sitting around for 90, 120 days, 180 days before it sells. You want stuff that's, so you can buy below market, rehab it, sell it at market price, and it'll move.
So can I ask you a question? So I'm one of the poor souls without MLS access. What tools could I use that would give me that information so I don't have to go manually?
Sure, that's a great question. I've been doing this 11 years. You can show me any other report, I've seen them all. The MLS is the best. It's still the industry standard that appraisers use, that realtors use, realtors that are going to sell your property. And so that's why you need to find a friend who has MLS access. Perhaps you could get a job as their assistant, and then you could have MLS access. That might be a way to do that.
Okay.
Something, but I would recommend to everybody in this room, if you're rehabbing a house, you're trying to comp houses, you need the MLS. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, okay.
Go ahead. So, the reason being, RealQuest is a big downside to RealQuest. Anybody want to know what the downquest to RealQuest is? It doesn't show you active and pending, it's just sold data. So the problem is, you can't assess your competition. When you're rehabbing a house, you want to look at what's active. What's active tells you what your competition is. What's pending tells you what's dropping currently in today's. And you can reasonably assume within 10% that if it's pending, it's sold within 90+% of whatever that price you see. And then solds are where you're going to get your comps with your appraisal. But you can tell very easily by looking at actives, pending, and solds whether the market's moving up or moving down. I'll give you an example. Actives are at 200, pendings are at 190, solds are at 180. See what's happening there? It's going up. You see the opposite to that. You see that the actives at 180, the pendings at 190, and the solds at 200. You're like, oh, that's heading the wrong direction. You want to be real careful. That's another play. The pricing's stable there, but it's stably going down. And so you can see that there's a pattern there. And that the problem is, you chase it at 170, you chase it at 160. I mean, where are you going to try to price that thing when you sell it? That's why it's important to look for stuff that's flatlining. Flatlining is fine, by the way, because as long as you buy right, you can sell in flat market, at market price, and it'll sell. A little bit of appreciation obviously is nice too, but when it's declining, just be careful. Be careful. You got to make sure And again, I can't put a figure on that. Do you chase it down 10%, 20%? I mean, I could tell you horror stories from 2007, 2008, where I chased assets down from 150 grand down to 90 grand, 80 grand to sell these things. I mean, just stuff that would just blow your mind. I bought a condo in 2007 for 100,000 that appraised out with a legitimate appraisal for 140. There was actually sold in the community for 140. I ended up short selling that asset in 2009 for guess how much? Anybody?
70.
How, 40? When anyone was
70.
lower? Oh, 40? 20 grand. 20 grand. I mean, the market disintegrated in 08. I mean, this is the worst case scenario, but I mean, I'm like, just be careful. When you're chasing stuff down, you gotta be real, real careful. The good news is, I believe there's about 2 years of good solid appreciation here in the Bay Area. And obviously with Amendment 2 passing, I've got my own belief that that'll affect the real estate market because of that, the fact of what's happening out in Colorado. But it does look like pricing is stable. But again, you gotta buy right in today's market. So you don't want the biggest house on the block. The reason you don't want the biggest house on the block, you typically can't buy them at a price that makes sense. You're gonna spend way more money rehabbing them, and they're not gonna appraise out. I'll give you an example. Everybody wants to look at it, say it's $150 a square foot. So if it's a 1,000 square foot house, and that's the average size in the neighborhood, and that's 150 bucks, that'll appraise out at 150 grand, right? Then people's assumption is if I buy a 3,000 square foot house, it's worth 450. It's not, it's not. And that's the question you gotta ask. Let's just take Seminole Heights here. The average bungalow here is, say 12 to 1,500 square foot, right? It's trading somewhere between $150 to $200 a square foot. I've got a 2,000 square foot house next door. It's not gonna trade it. It's not gonna trade at 450. It's probably gonna tap out around 350, 400 grand because that's what the area caps out. And that's where you gotta be real careful. I remember seeing this, I bought this several years ago. I bought a 5,000 square foot home in a neighborhood off of Linebaugh, Dale Mabry. It was close to that neighborhood, yeah, Linebaugh, Dale Mabry. I was thinking this thing's worth 400 or 500 grand. We ended up selling this, well, no, I think I comped it out of 300 grand. We ended up selling the thing at 200 grand because the neighborhood was like, the house was worth like 150. So we got a $50,000 premium for having an extra 4,000 square foot. I'll tell you, big houses can kill you. And we spent so much money on that renovation, just, it was shocking. Had an indoor pool, I mean, the house was retarded, but it was just way overspent. So between the rehab and between the fact that it didn't even match up with the average size house, that's a scary place to be. If you've got a 2,000 square foot house and it's 1,500 square foot, that's not bad. But you don't want one of these monster houses because the rehab's gonna shock you. You can literally spend 3 times as much money on houses 3 times as big. That's how bad it can get. So you think you're rehabbing these type of houses at 30 grand? Right, you bought a
Where's that?
How much you spend on a rehab for an FHA kind of level house?
Oh, 20 to 30 easily.
20 to 30. Yeah, you can spend like 60 to 90 grand on the same house if it's 3 times as big. That's why big houses, as a rule for rehabbers, if you got the biggest house in the block, stay away from it. Not an ugly house. Ultimately, the women are going to be making a decision here when you go to buy the house. If they don't like the way it looks, it's not going to sell for the same amount. You can have a 1,500 square foot ugly house and a 1,500 square foot nice house, especially when you get to historic architecture, sell for 2 different prices completely, just by the fact that it's an ugly house. Or it could be a house that's scattered together where they built on and built on and built on and built on. So you're walking through one room after another, and then we'll get to that in just a second. But if it just looks ugly, you're going to be dinged on the price you sell for it. And if you've got a good looking house, you will get over market value for a really good looking house. So keep that in mind when you're rehabbing. The comps don't tell you everything.
Yeah, based on what you just said too, the appraisers don't look at functionality.
They
So
will.
it doesn't have any function to it.
And that's it. If you got a house with a weird layout, you don't have it in your budget to fix that layout, or it's not fixable, stay away from it.
That's an interesting question. Does that come into an appraisal? I mean, if an appraiser comes and goes,
Yes, if you
I
put
don't
a
like
door
it.
on a room and say call it a bedroom, and it's not really a bedroom, it clearly makes no sense. Yeah, appraisers ultimately, it's not a science.
It's subjective.
Yeah, it is subjective there. So you've got to keep that in mind. Both the buyer and the appraiser will see this. So if you've got a house with a weird layout that either A, can't be fixed, if it can't be fixed, as a rehab, stay away from it. If it has a weird layout and you can fix it, make sure you got your budget for it. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, if you just try to, and I see this all the time with people having rehab, they just rehab what's there, and the house never made sense to begin with. Like the example, you walk through one room, to get to another room, to get to another room. I've seen it, 3 rooms in a row. So what are you gonna do? Like, who do you put in which room? I mean, how does that work? It doesn't work. And then they call it a 4-bedroom house. In reality, you got 3 rooms joined together in another room. It's just a 2-bedroom house. It's not a 4. So it's not a functional house. So be really, really cognizant of the way the house looks, because ultimately as a rehabber, you're only gonna spend a certain amount of dollars. So unless you're gonna transform the way the outside looks, which we do sometimes, if our budget allows, especially on a historic home, but typically in a bog standard neighborhood, you're not gonna have a budget to completely change the way a house looks. It's just ugly, the roof lines are weird, and you can tell it's been added onto here and here and here, it just doesn't make sense. Probably stay away from it. Doesn't mean it's a bad house, but for a renovation, for a rehab you're trying to make money on today's market, not a good
Can I ask you
bet.
a question about that?
Yes, you can.
So, when it comes to how much research you do, or how concerned are you about going back to see if work was permitted? And how does the county, if somebody put some crazy addition on, you look at the records, obviously not permitted, have you had the county come back and say you need to do A, B, and C, or?
Depends, it's municipality by municipality. Here in Hillsborough County, I've found that once the appraiser documents the addition, you typically won't have problems. In Pinellas County, they'll make you approve everything and go back to the beginning and make you review it. So really it's down to you. And even within Pinellas County, City of Largo is different than City of Clearwater, which is different than the City of St. Petersburg. They're all different. So really, you've got to know your municipality and you've got to do your due diligence on that. And really check before you buy a property. Does it have a code problems? Does it have permit problems? You've got to check. That's where you got to do your research. And that could be the difference between making money or losing a bunch of money. I mean, especially in Pinellas, we've just got killed on some of our houses.
How do you find Hillsborough as far as?
Better.
Okay.
I find the city better than the county, especially when you're sorting out liens. The city just has a straight rule. If it's less than 1 year, it's $1,000. In a couple of years, it's $2,000.
So to add on to Mark's question, if you've got a 3132, they've converted the garage.
Yeah.
You go look at the appraiser's website, and they've actually converted that to living area. You're probably safe then.
I don't want to give you a legal opinion on that,
Okay.
but you should check into it. I found a lot of cases you're okay. I've seen in other cases where you go to open up other permits or do new work that's permitted, then you're opening up the can of worms. So it's the kind of thing that if you don't do anything, a lot of times it'll slide through. But if you go to pull an electrical permit and they see that the addition wasn't permitted, then they'll make you not only pull electrical permit, then you'll need to pull full permits on the entire addition. And that's where you've almost tagged yourself there. So that's where you got to ask yourself the question, was the construction good? And if I do get dinged on this, am I going to have to rebuild everything? Even if it looks like a sloppy addition, the building departments would think the same thing. So if it looked like literally just pieced onto the house, stay away from it. If you can tell there's no foundation there, stay away from it. Because an addition, just bringing an addition into compliance that was completely done wrong, could cost you 20 or 30 grand. If your budget's 30 grand, you're done. That's just sunk your ship right there on one go. So, yes.
So this include a lot of properties where you see like an extra back porch type, like added on to the back of the
Yeah,
house?
again, it comes down to a lot of porch foundations. You might get a 4-inch slab, which is not going to pass, and that's the problem. That's where you see a lot of these houses. I don't know if you've seen this. Anyone who's toured a lot of properties, you'll see on any of these additions that they're starting to crack away from the house. The reason being is because the foundation was like a porch. It wasn't made to carry the load of a wall and a roof,
Right.
and all these other things, and that's why it's just sinking because the foundation wasn't right. So when you start to see stuff like that, that's your first clue that
Get away.
get away from that. Well, it's not, that means a bad house. Could be a good rental, could be good for other purposes, could be fine to live in, but it's not going to be a good candidate typically for renovating. Location's key. You can change everything about your property, but you can't change your neighbors. If you've got a person that's breeding pit bulls beside your house, it's going to affect the value of your house. There's nothing you can do about that. There's nothing. Well, I guess there is, but that would be probably not legal. But seriously though, if you've got a neighbor that's a hoarder and they're hoarding so bad that it's spilled out in their front yard, there's nothing you can do about that. You can do lights, landscaping, a sprinkler system, and do all these things. You're done. If you've got neighbors that are loud, play loud music all day, all night.
They got chicken.
They got chickens. We got chickens right here actually. But actually here in Seminole Heights, the city code allows for you can have a certain amount of chickens per square. But anyway, location is key. So not only the total location, in other words, the area is going to affect your value. I'm fine buying and selling in any neighborhood. I'm not worried about that. But what you need to understand if you're gonna renovate a house is your immediate neighbors there's nothing you can do to change those. If you're trying to get in and get out of a property in 2 months, typically an area is not gonna change. It just kinda is what it is. So if you got nice neighbors, people are gonna wanna live there. If you got bad neighbors, people with an FHA loan that are only capped out at 150 grand, you're gonna be the last choice. They'll buy your house, but you're not gonna be the first choice, and you're gonna sell below what you could have sold it for if you have better neighbors. And so you've gotta really kind of write down your values. If the comps are showing 150 and you got bad neighbors, you may end up selling that house 120, 130 grand. And this is where experience kicks in, because we've been in certain situations. I remember one time, this is probably the most colorful story, I had a urban pharmacist next to a house I was rehabbing. So I went over to I said, listen, you have a thriving business, which I can tell. It's like, let's make a deal. I'll leave you alone if you leave my house alone and you make sure you don't throw any trash in the yard. You kind of keep your business yourself. Is that cool? So we made a deal, and he kept himself, and I kept myself, and we sold the house. But that's not going to happen all the time. A lot of times, especially if you've got that kind of activity going on, it's going on 24/7. And then people are going to drive up to see the house. This particular place was so bad. There was people jumping in there. Buyers come to the house and jump in their car. They thought they wanted to buy drugs, and I'm like, oh my goodness, you can't do that. You can't jump in people's cars. So yeah, that was the worst thing we ever had. But my point to all that is you cannot fix your neighbors overnight. So make sure,
Pharmacist.
what we do, when I get pictures, urban pharmacist, urban apothecary, whatever you call it. So anyway, when we get pictures from the houses, what I'm looking at, because I don't go see any of these houses, I buy them all from the computer, from the evals I get. We'll have a picture look at the house, neighbor side, down the street, across the street. Because I want to know, what am I buying into here? The house could be great or the house could be terrible, but I want to know what the neighbors look like, and you should too. Houses to avoid, ones with structural issues. If you're rehabbing a house, you don't have a ton of experience, you see a structural issue, done, out. Don't even touch it. Inherent design issues, low ceilings. We call that, probably not the best name, but not politically correct. We call them midget houses. So if they got the ones where they left out, a lot of times in the 70s, for instance, they were trying to save money, and they left out the top layer of block. I mean, you guys have probably been in these houses. I mean, this ceiling's this height throughout the house. You can't change that. No one's going to want to buy the house. They got one person in the family's tall, or they got a tall relative.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to really think about who you want to sell the house to if you got a low ceiling. If it's got a strange layout, you can't fix it, which we spoke about. Ugly exterior, weird position of the lot. Like, you ever see these houses where they're all front yard and the house is stuck in the back of the lot? You got like 2 feet near the fence. That's going to take away from the value because you can't pick up the house and move it. So if it's got a weird location, a weird position in the lot that doesn't make sense, as a rehab, stay away from it. Low elevation flood zones. If you look at something that's below sea level, the insurance is going to go through the roof. And if you've got a buyer that can qualify for $1,200 a month, the insurance could push it up $200 or $300 a month, and that's going to kill the value of your house if you're selling to a finance buyer. And again, we spoke about this, crazy neighbors. I would stay away from anyone who hasn't rehabbed a ton of houses. I would stay away from all of these. So what do you need to get started? You've got to have access to capital. If you want to rehab a house, whether it's your own money, friends and family money, institutional money, there's lots of money out there, but you definitely have to get the access and draw down that money. Really start seeing what you can get. You've got to have a basic understanding of construction and the workflow. You've got to have ability to be able to choose a good rehab based on some of the criteria we spoke about. Access to capital. You want multiple lenders. You don't want to be stuck with Uncle Frank, and then when you go to ask him for money, he doesn't have it. So you found the deal, then you can't get the money, right? You want to make sure that that stuff's secure. The best way to secure it is to have a couple sources of money. Reasonable rates. You know, Uncle Frank might charge you 23% annually to get you, but you can't make any money then. So you got to make sure that you got to get reasonable rates. Typically, when I'm seeing hard money, 8 to 12% is what I'm seeing as a good range, a couple points. If I'm seeing, back in the day, 2007, the most egregious lender I saw locally was charging 10% and 10 points. It was just egregious. That lender put himself out of business, put all of the people that put money into his mortgage company out of business. I mean, I just see foreclosure after foreclosure after foreclosure on that stuff. The borrowers went out of business. I mean, it was a model that just didn't make sense for a rehab. And yeah, 10 and 10, yeah, it's just egregious. I mean, if you're rehabbing a house, you're not going to make any money. So reasonable rates. You want reasonable terms on top of that, you know, if you have a loan that balloons in 90 days and you're trying to rehab a house, everyone know what I mean by ballooning in 90 days. So the loan's called due in 90 days, you just got the house rehabbed on the market, and now you gotta pay the lender. That doesn't make sense. The terms, typically you want up to 1 year, and you want to be able to extend it beyond that. Because if you rehab a house and something goes wrong, you could definitely go beyond a year. Understanding construction. You want to look at the main trades. You got the roof, electrical, plumbing, AC, flooring, cabinets, general construction, appliances, and landscaping. And I'm actually going to go back. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Again, we're not, I don't know, is anyone here a general contractor? Didn't think so, neither am I. This is generally, for the layperson, what the main trades that you're going to be working on in your rehab. Some of those you can combine, like if it's minor electrical and plumbing, you can probably have a general construction guy do. But in a lot of cases, and even the flooring, but a lot of cases, this is what this is the jobs we'll sub out on a particular house. And you need to know how a house is put together, how that works. How's the job flow? Permanent versus non-permanent, big difference. If you know for sure you're gonna have to pull a general construction permit and all the permits below it, how long do you think that adds on to a job? Anybody? I would say 60 to 90 days. Addition on top of the construction, which means a non-permanent job that would take you 60 or 90 days with permits will take you 120 to 180 days just to rehab it. Just to rehab it. Then you got to market it, and then you got to sell it. See, that's what I mean. You can be into that property for a year before you even snap your fingers. That's being efficient in what you're doing. So definitely it's important to understand that you've got a 19, Pinellas is notorious for this. Again, I already spoke that they're a rough municipality to work on. All the houses there are built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So you're into full permits. As soon as you touch a house over there, that's tough. So non-permits, typically if you pick the right person, they'll just get the job done. You don't need to stress too much about the order. What I mean by that is that if you got a guy, handyman who knows what they're doing, it's a cosmetic rehab, you're not specifying, well, make sure you do this. Some guys like to go room by room. I've got guys that want to finish this room, they'll go to the next room, they'll go to the next room. We've got other guys that do all the demo first, and then they'll do all the prep work, they'll do all the painting, which is, by the way, the logical way to do it. But the reality is this, with non-permits, you got the right guy, everyone has their own way of doing it. However, if you got a permitted job, it's got to follow the order because you've got inspections. So typically you demo it, then you've got your rough in trades, so you got to get your electrical, your plumbing, your mechanical. If you've got framing, if you're moving walls at all, or even if the frame is bad, you got to have a frame inspection, insulation inspection. All these things have to be done first. Then the general construction guy moves in, and he'll close everything up. Then after that, all the trades go back, and so the plumber will have ran the pipes, but then he'll put the faucet on there. And then the electrician will have ran the wires, but he'll hang the fan. So that's called the trim out stage. And then after that, you typically do your flooring appliances. At the very end, you do your landscaping. The reason you do it at the end is because these guys like to drive. They see brand new sod, it's like a magnet. They want to drive on it. So same thing with carpet. They see new carpet, they want to stain it. They're like, I have to stain this brand new carpet. They walk in with muddy boots. So typically, appliances get scratched. So typically in new property, you put in stainless appliances. If you rub anything off, you'll scratch them. So this is the kind of stuff you do at the end. Big key here, do the roof first. If you got a bad roof, you're going to be leaking, there's a lot of reasons why. Number one, if you're not pulling all of these permits, let's just suppose there's stuff where you don't have to pull a permit, or it's questionable. By doing the roof first and pulling a permit, you have a permit on the job. Does that make sense? And you don't close it out until the end of the job when everything else is done. But you always want to do your roofs first, besides the usual where it could just leak on this brand new stuff you're doing. It makes sense to do your roofs first. Picking the right contractor. References are the key. I truly believe it's such a notoriously bad industry. Knowing someone who knows this person, getting a good referral is a great way to weed out some of these bad guys.
Jesus.
It's ideal. What?
Jesus is good.
He's making a joke, so he's not even going to respond to that. Can we delete that shit? So, anyway, it's ideal if they come through someone you know. You want to look at what projects they're currently working on, just completed. Reason being, drive by and check it out. Drive by and check it out. That's it. You say, hey, I'm working a job. Well, what job are you working on? A house. It's like the tenant that comes in, where'd you live? fell out of the sky, you know, you don't want that tenant. Because the tenant lives somewhere beforehand, so if they can't provide you an address, you can't verify it, that means they screwed over their previous landlord. If you got a contractor that can't tell you where they're working, they're either A, not working, or they don't want to tell you, and there's a good reason why they don't want to tell you. So this is a great way to weed out someone who's just completely like not legit. This is key. Anyone want to read this? Anybody?
Watch out for contractors that want money up front.
The first job.
Yes, with the primary focus, where's my draw? Where's my draw? Where's my draw? But if you have any guys that say, no, where's my draw? It's like, you don't know this person, and they want a big check in hand, that's not good. Typically, if it's a brand new job, I'll say, listen, you got guys on site, I'll give you a check tomorrow. You want to see them show up, you want to see who's showing up, but they're actually doing stuff. But yeah, if you can't get a guy to do that, and I don't know him, I'm not giving him a draw. I'm not dealing with people like that. And this is a big key. I get these horror stories. Well, I paid them and never finished. Well, why did you pay them? Not being like...
Because they were hungry, they didn't have any gas.
Right, but don't pay them everything until they're done. I mean, I've got a dispute on one of my properties right now, holding out $5,000 because they did the job incorrectly. I'm going to pay them, but I want to make sure they fix it. And I figured $5,000 is enough incentive. There's probably about $2,000 worth of work, but I want to make sure they're going to finish it. If I hold back $500 for $2,000 worth of work, they're never coming back. They're just not. Or they're going to tell you they're coming back tomorrow, and it's going to be tomorrow for the next 6 months. So this is key. Don't pay everything until everything is finished. Until you're happy with the job, don't pay for it. And they'll always hold this thing about lien releases, and I'll say fine, state of Florida, no problem at all. You file a fraudulent lien on my property, I'm coming after you for treble damages. I welcome you to file a fraudulent lien on my property, no problem. That doesn't scare me at all, and it shouldn't scare you either. If they're trying to do something to jam up your property that's not legitimate, you can fight back under, I'm not an attorney, but based on some of the cases we've settled before, we can pursue people for treble damages based on a frivolous suit.
You know, one thing that I've learned through a couple of rehabs is I have zero patience. First thing I do is see their first day of work. If I don't like it the first day, I'm not going to like it the third day, I'm not going to like it the 10th day.
Yeah.
They got one day and they're gone. I used to feel bad about firing people or giving them.
Well, you're right. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. You know, an employee, I can typically tell them the first day, if I think an employee, I can tell if they're definitely not going to work out on the first day. I can tell if it looks like they're going to work out on the first day. So yeah, the way they show up, which is typically their best foot forward in their first job, if they're best foot forward, it'd be like going on a first date and it's horrendous. You're probably not going to go out on the second date, right? Because it's where everybody's putting their best foot forward and trying to impress each other. So it's kind of like that with a contractor. It's the same way everybody's, trying to romance each other. You're like, hey, I'm a great person to work for. Well, I'm a great contractor. Everybody's trying to impress each other. But if the first day doesn't go good, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. So let's talk about how much money to sink in a house. Don't overspend, has to appraise. If your budget's 40 grand, you got some flex in there at 45, you can't go over 45. You can spend 80, you're not making any money though. The goal of rehabbing is to make money. And so make sure before going into it, you have a budget that makes sense. And as you're managing the job, that not every contractor is hitting you up for extras. It's the big thing. Well, I didn't know I was gonna have to move the wall, but it's in your bid. I know, but it took more work. Well, fine, I'm not paying you, because that was in your bid. Just had the same dispute in Miami this morning over a job. Areas typically have a cap, and that's where you've got to look at the appraisal and the cap. This goes to really bigger houses, what I was going back to earlier. If it's a 300 grand neighborhood, you can have an amazing house that's 3 times the size of everything, it's still a $300,000 neighborhood. So you might get 350 for it, 330, but you're not going to get 600 grand in a 300 grand neighborhood. Does that make sense? So don't get. But you'll avoid this issue if you don't rehab huge houses compared to the surrounding houses like we spoke about earlier. Try to keep in line with the neighborhood standard. So if you're in a neighborhood where they're using custom granite and custom cabinets, and you try to put in base level Home Depot cabinets and stain them and Formica countertops, you're not in line with the standard. You're going to confuse buyers. Like, why on earth did you put these in here? Now, if you go the opposite of that, put something real, no one's going to complain. However, if you've gone over your budget, it didn't make sense. I will say this though, if you have a budget and you bought right, you want to go nicer than your competition, I'm okay with that, because your house will be the first house to sell. We're talking about spending twice what your budget was and just not even being close. And a lot of this is to do with doing a standard that's worse than the neighborhood. I see rehabbers do this all the time. They put cheap carpet where you can actually feel the nails and the concrete bumps underneath it. And it's a $300,000 house. I'm like, what are you doing? They put these cheap doors like that are flush instead of like a colonial or some sort of, they're putting these like cheap brushed nickel handles, and just everything's cheap, and like a $20 Glacier Bay faucet. And I'm like, you're just confusing the buyers. The buyers can see that it's new, but they're like, I'm gonna have to rip everything that's new out of this house. So you've confused the buyers. You're actually gonna sell your house somewhere between what a wholesale house would go for and a retail deal, because the people who are gonna buy it are gonna rip everything out. So even though it's clean, you'll get a premium over wholesale, but the buyers are still gonna be going, well, I have to replace that, replace that, replace that. So there's no point doing that. You wanna make sure you look at your standard and keep it in line with that. So how to quickly estimate the rehab costs. You wanna look at the major trades, find easy ways to estimate this. So when you're looking at a lot of houses and you get into rehabbing, as you get some bids back, you wanna start to create some rules. So for instance, the roof, say, okay, it was 40 squares and you charged me $250 a square, that's $10,000. So guess what? If you know how to measure a roof, which is not that hard, it's some basic math, you can figure out what the roof's gonna cost. And what you wanna do is get sample pricing and then make a cheat sheet for, I'll give you some ways to do it. Price per square foot, linear price, based on the size of the home. We have a lot of rules we use. If it's a 1,500 square foot house, it's gonna cost us 2,000 this, so. But the point is, for each trade, you can create a cheat sheet. And that way then, when you get the next job you're trying to evaluate, you know how to price stuff up. And joining some of these RIAs and some other groups where there's other people doing this is a good way to kind of talk to other people that are in the same industry. We typically send at least 2. We don't tell them we're selling to multiple people. That's the worst thing you want to tell a contractor. Hey, I'm sending this out to everybody for bid. It's going to be lowest of the list. Who wants to bid against 10 other people? Nobody. So if you wouldn't want to do that, they're not going to want to do it either. So I don't tell them I'm selling out multiple people. Put a time limit. This is key. Don't tell me you want it tomorrow at 5 p.m. because that's ridiculous. But we typically allow 48 to 72 hours back for bid. Kind of going back to what you're saying. If you're not even hearing anything, they're not submitting a bid. That's the same way they're going to work. That's just the reality. Remember, price is not the only component. Why is the price not the only component when you're rehabbing?
Quality work.
Quality work and time. If the guy takes 6 months and is going to charge you $10,000, and the guy is going to do it in 2 months and charge you $12,000, and your cost of money is $1,000 a month, so the extra 4 months cost you $4,000, the contractor costs you $2,000, you're still $2,000 ahead of the curve. Does that make sense? So yeah, for sure, you want to make sure that you look at how quickly they're going to do the job, because time is money, and that's why we're not haggling over $50. When we're rehabbing houses, we're just getting them done at this point, because if it's going to take you a week to get an email back over $50, and your interest was costing you $500 a week, that just makes 0 sense. How to manage jobs effectively. Create a workflow. The simplest tool without spending a bunch of money on software is we use a Google Docs. Actually, we've switched over to Builder Trend. So if you guys are rehabbing several houses, Builder Trend is the new software we're using. We find that effective for managing multiple rehabs. But you at least want to create a plan. Do this first, then this. This guy is going to be done on this date, and then this person comes in. If you don't walk in with a plan, you're definitely going to take way more than you should have. So you at least want to have a plan and also adjust the plan as the job goes through. But you do need to have a workflow. Manage your follow-up dates. The key is, if you got to follow up with the plumber Monday, so if you want to take off and go to the beach, and you're only hurting yourself on these things. So if you've set your follow-up dates, make sure you manage them, reset the next follow-up date, and do an effective job of that. Don't pay too soon, because what happens is you put way too much money in their hand, they've got their money, and then the work doesn't get done. So you want to make sure that you're dripping money out at the same pace the work's getting done. Always get the contractor to commit to a time frame, whether it's a plumber, electrician, a roofer, your main construction guy. You got to get them to commit to something and put that in writing, because otherwise you're just shooting in the dark. What happens is the job gets done when it gets done, not when you want it to get done. Whenever the contractor feels like getting it done, that's when that job will get done. Now, I'm not saying it's going to go perfectly on time, but at least if you get the plumber to show up on Wednesday, be done by Friday, everybody's on the same page. The goal is to get the house done by Friday. That way there's no surprises when you're emailing on Friday at 4 p.m. Is it done? No. You're going to get a no, and here's why, and here's a couple things that work. Instead of just, no, it'll be done next week. That's the kind of answer you get if you never set out a time limit. And what are you going to say? Okay. Because you never set an expectation before you you put any money in their hand and sign a contract, so they're just gonna do it when they do it. They're not exactly wrong either, by the way, because you never even specified when you wanted it done. You just assumed. And assuming is just not a good thing when it comes to rehabbing. Insurance, always get it. This year, we've had 3 fires. Yeah, and one was arson. So yeah, when you're rehabbing houses, just be careful. Actually, sorry, 3 fires and 1 person came back. We bought it was at the county courthouse steps. We bought the house. The previous owner came back, spent an hour chainsawing down a grand oak on the property to land and collapse the house. So yeah, if we didn't have insurance, done.
Did he go to jail?
They're still trying to find him. The thing is, we've got description of the vehicle. It's gonna be a very hard thing. We gotta find fingerprints on a tree, but it was him. We know who it was.
Do you get builders? What kind of insurance? Because I know there's like.
Yeah, we use a bulk insurance policy. Okay, I'm gonna be cognizant of time. I'm gonna wrap up in 10 minutes here. So, always get it. Get insurance, make sure you're covered. And for a rehabber, you want to cover against catastrophic loss. That's really all you want. So if your deductible is $5,000, that's not what you're concerned about. You're concerned about the place burning down, the place flooding, the place, during hurricane season, just getting destroyed. Vandalism, you want to make sure it's in there, because in this case, it wasn't in there, we were done. So, yeah, that actually worked out good. We got to fix a thing for 10 or 20, got to check with 50, but yeah, you always want to get insurance. Do not skimp on that. Also, when you're opening up a house, you can cause your own electrical problems, electrical fire. There's so many things that can go wrong. You definitely want insurance. Make sure your contractors have it too. If Mr. Contractor chops off his hand, sawing a piece of wood on your property, and he's got no insurance coming after you. Not only in your insurance cover, it's coming after you personally. So you want to make sure your contractors all have insurance too. Get the right kind. This is where you need to discuss with the insurance agent. Some of the things I talked about, but the big thing for the house is that you're covering against a catastrophic loss. So that's why I would not argue over deductibles. You can get a way cheaper insurance policy by raising your deductible. You just want to make sure you're not getting a total loss. And some final random thoughts here. Start with one project. I've seen rehabbers come out of the gate, buying 5 or 10 houses, and then they make a mess of all of them, and you get these half rehabbed houses, then get them back in the wholesale market. I see it all the time.
I've seen a general contractor do that.
I've seen it actually.
He started too many houses, he was a builder.
Yeah.
He still is a builder. He started too many houses at the same time. He was a GC, he's brilliant, he has 2 master's degrees, but he'd never built a house before.
Well, project management, it's dealing with people is its own degree, I think, right there, besides
Yeah.
construction. Find a friend with good eyes for colors and design. Ultimately, you can do great construction in a house and come out with a great renovation project, but I've seen rehabbers, they pick these terrible colors and they just don't look good. You want someone, all of us know someone here who's good at design. Grab that person, if you gotta buy them dinner or whatever you gotta do, get some ideas from them. Make sure you're not putting stuff that doesn't go together. And you can have great cabinets and great granite and great tile, but it doesn't go together, it just looks stupid. And then the ladies are gonna come in, look at the kitchen, and go, man, I like the house. They don't like this is all ugly. Well, it's gonna decrease the value of your house. They'll buy it, they're not gonna buy it for what they would have bought if you put nice stuff in.
One thing I add to that is I spent a lot of time in the beginning doing that, and once I got the formula, I just.
There you go.
Just
And also, I would say on Mark's note, you want to make sure that you're changing up that every 3 to 6 months. Because styles are definitely changing. The stuff that we rehabbed 10 years ago, buyers would literally fall off the chair laughing if we put out that product today, from the 2005. So you want to make sure you're putting out stuff that's in line with today's styles. Also, do not enter a deal. If your goal is to create a new price point, well, I know nothing's sold over for $250, but this house is going to be amazing. I'm going to sell it for $300. No, don't. If you sell it for $300, wonderful. You made an extra $50,000. But underwrite the deal based on what's currently selling, what's trading, not trying to enter the deal, make your profit off selling it for this astronomical amount. And that's it. So, any questions? All right.